I'm Steve Kinsella, and the podcast is called Stroke Hope. And there is a website, strokehope.com, and it's a podcast for and about survivors of strokes and the people who love them.
The first major one, if I remember correctly, is that you were in Antioch High School, or
It was actually at M&O Grant Elementary School, and I was walking from the administration office back to the music room, and suddenly my legs were very hard to lift and take a step. And then in about 15 seconds, everything was fine again. So I wasn't too alarmed about it and went on about my day. That evening, I had a rehearsal, and I had been sitting for a while on a tall stool. Got up to go to the restroom and noticed again it was a little difficult, but I attributed that to the tall stool I'd been sitting on, thinking, oh, I must have cut the blood circulation off to my legs. That again subsided. I went home, went to bed. The next morning, my alarm went off, and I went to swing my legs out of bed, and I could not. I called the emergency room and the advice nurse, and they said that they suspected I had had a stroke and that they would send me an ambulance. And I said, you know, my girlfriend lives 30 seconds from me. She'll be here and have me at the hospital before the ambulance would even get here. So that's the route we took. And I went in and was immediately handled with great care, rapid response at Kaiser Antioch. And I can't imagine having had that experience anywhere else. So I was glad that's where I went.
and since then you've had uh, four additional strokes, or
I've had, that was number two. I've had two others that were extreme. And I don't recommend doing what I did on the second one. I was getting out of the car at the supermarket, and I felt that heaviness in my legs. So I got back in the car. I was on Balfour Road, and I drove myself to the hospital. Something I tell everyone don't do. But at the time, it seemed like a great idea to me. I went in, and this time, because I was there so quickly, I was able to be given a clot busting drug that worked. And in 2 days, I was home. The first time, it was 4 days in the ICU because it had been too much time since the initial stroke had happened. That drug would not have worked. In fact, it may have harmed me. But the second time, yes, it helped, and I was home in 2 days. A lot of support around me, but I did get to go home.
so what was the first mini stroke then? Like, what was the feeling then?
You know, I had no sensation of it at all, but I had lost the hearing in my left ear suddenly and profoundly, and they did not know why. So they did a CAT scan, and they found not a reason to lose the hearing, but that I had had a stroke.
Hmm.
I had no sensation of it,
How,
no symptom at all. It
how
was
long after
tough.
that was that they determined it was a stroke?
Well, they weren't sure exactly when that had happened, but I believe it was October when the results of that MRI came back showing that I had had a stroke. The second one, they knew within hours it was a Pons stroke, which is at the base of the brain, and it presents itself oddly. That's why the both legs weren't working, not just one side or the other. The residual from that was a weakened left side.
Well, how did they determine that it was a stroke by doing the CAT scans?
Yes, yes. CAT scan is the sort of top test that they can do, and they see it. And I was able to see both the first mini stroke, which was like a pin dot, like a match head. The second one was about the size of my palm and under the just over the base of my brainstem. The third one was up in the front left of my head, and the symptoms were about the same. I knew it was coming on. I smiled, and somebody said, "Yes, your face is sagging," which is one of the telltale signs. So I went in pretty quick for that one. that was a few days after a fall that I took in a dark auditorium, my fault. And I had hit my head, not very hard, but I hit it a little bit. And that's what triggered that one. The next big one happened in May of 2025. And that was a similar thing. I went in, they found it, and it was, again, time enough where they could give me medication to dissolve the clots. And so I didn't have a real bad time and was home in a couple of days again. Great ICU unit for strokes, by the way, at Kaiser Antioch, and they took great care of me. And then the fifth and final one, I had not noticed again, but I was in for what turned out to be something called a complex migraine, where it acts like a stroke, but it's not a stroke. The face doesn't droop, and complex migraine sounds kind of like a simple thing, but it really scared me because it was like a stroke again. But they said, no, good news. All you do on this is take about 1,000 milligrams Tylenol and 2 glasses of water and go to bed. You'll be fine. And the telltale difference was with the complex migraine, you see wavy lines in front of you. With the stroke, that doesn't much happen.
Okay. Well, since that first major stroke, when was it that you decided to do a podcast about other stroke survivors?
That's a good question. I'll tell you what happened was I had heard of a woman I kind of knew and that she'd had a major stroke, and I wrote her a Facebook message that her husband saw and read to her. And it was about the things that they don't talk about as much, the non-physical things like gaps in your thinking, gaps in time, depression, a desire to isolate. And I talked to her about those things in this message, and that those things weren't a bad sign. They were a natural thing because your brain is repairing itself. And there's a myriad of things that go on. And the husband called me back and he said, look, what you said made all the difference in our family, in our home. My wife's demeanor, her desire for recovery and to continue to work, her physical therapy and occupational therapy and speech therapy goals. And he said, we didn't find this information anywhere, and you can't keep it to yourself. You should really think about a way to get the word out. And I said, well, thanks. And he said, maybe a podcast. And I thought about a podcast, but I thought, I still look kind of off, and I wasn't sure about that. But I have a much more technically advanced daughter in New York who's knocking on Broadway's door, and another one in Tennessee. And I said, what do you guys think about this? And they said, they don't have to be visual. They can be just the sound. And I explored it, and before I knew it, Bridget, the New York daughter, had set up a website and helped me with the first podcast. Some other friends of mine, some former acting students of mine who are now voiceover actors, said, we'll do an intro and an outro for you. Another fellow that I taught voiceover to gave me a killer microphone, and it started to fall into place. The first 2 episodes I did about my journey, and then the third one is about the difference people could make by sharing their story, not only for the listener, but for the speaker as well. And people started calling me saying, oh, I'd like to tell my story. So I have thus far done programs, a woman in San Diego, a woman in New York. Coming up is a guy from England, a guy from Canada, a guy from Miami, Dallas, Fort Worth, and they're hearing the program and feeling it has a value and that they'd like to share their story and their message of hope as well.
You mentioned to me that you just had an interview with the first local guest of your show.
Yes, yes. Wonderful guy. Had a real close call. He's going to be on his show. Will drop in 2 or 3 weeks. His name is Tim Partain. We had a wonderful conversation before and after the recording of the program. He's a fighter, and his type of stroke is a very serious one. And I let him, rather than get into any kind of lecture mode about things I'm not an expert in, I just let him tell his story. And I'll tell you, it's wonderful that he's here. He's very thankful to his parents and wife for having been there for him. Of course, that they would, but he was very vocal about how big a difference they made, and having people around him, which has been a common theme for a lot of the survivors of strokes.
Well, that's the first local one, but how did you get in touch with the other people who seem from all over the world? Do you have people from Canada or a guy from?
Well, I posted that it was happening on Nextdoor and Facebook and Messenger, and people that saw me locally sent it to their friends in all these places, and the friends listened to the program. And one of the unique things about the podcast is that it's not monetized at all. Nobody's trying to sell you anything. Nothing costs anything. And there's also it's a very short program as podcasts go. I think the most successful podcast in the world right now is who I can see her face, Mel Robbins. I think she's #1, and her programs are an hour and a half to 2 hours long. Well, stroke survivors can't hang that long. And so I decided I don't have to stretch out anything. And so the programs are 25 to 30 minutes max, and most of them closer to 25. And in that time, people tell their story, their experiences, their healing process, and what motivated them to continue to work the work they had to do to get better.
And do you remember what month and year was your first major stroke?
Yes, February 23rd in 24.
And when was the first episode of your podcast?
A year and a month later, 13 months later, March of 25.
And so the whole purpose of the podcast was to inform people of more of that emotional side or that mental struggle that people have after having a stroke, right?
That is an element for sure, but I think it's more that the people are telling their stories and they're hearing it from the actual people who lived it, rather than reading about it or hearing somebody say something about someone they know. So it's actually the people who experienced it sharing their path, and also, while certainly the mental part of it is something that most of them share, also the frustrations of some of the physical limitations. And there are a lot of different numbers on that. I mean, different types of limitations. Last year in America, 795,000 people had strokes. In California, the death rate has been 13 to 17,000. The last 2 years, it was 17,961 average. So that number is going up. And I think that another calling of the podcast is to let people know, don't discount something that's going on with your body. If you're having weakness on one side or the other, if your smile is crooked and one side of your face is sagging, if you cannot repeat 5 words back to someone who says them, and if you have more weakness in the arms is also pretty much of a telltale sign. And the thing about medications that help you in stroke situations are those first few hours are critical toward being able to apply the type of medicine that breaks up clots. And if you miss that window, you miss that window. They can't give it to you after that time because it could, as one doctor said, well, yes, the disadvantage would be it would probably kill you. And I said, well, let's not go that direction then. And the second time that I had a major stroke, I was at the hospital within 35 minutes. And I said, am I able to use that drug, or because I've had one stroke, is that a problem? They said, no, we're ready to give it to you right now. I signed something, they gave it to me, and within about 2 hours, my face stopped sagging. I was talking and making more sense. The first time when I went to the hospital, I remember a doctor pulling out his ballpoint pen and saying, "What's this?" I said, "A pen." Pointed to his glasses. "What are these?" "Glasses." Pointed to his watch. "What's this?" I said, "A clock." I thought, did I say a clock? I did. And he said, "Not bad. You're in the realm." And he said, "I'd like to send you for an MRI right away." And he said the clock to a watch, that little confusion is a very common thing that happens as well. Our thoughts are still churning, but how they fire and actually come out of our mouths is a different thing.
How many episodes of the podcast do you have now out there? I believe it was 7.
Right
I think I
now,
saw.
only 7. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And what I'm looking at with the lineup that I have, I'm just doing one a week, and took a big break through the holidays, actually starting Thanksgiving. But I may, if people keep lining up to be on the program, I may start doing 2 a week, as my attention span lets me. Attention span is a big part of having had a stroke. I was a theatrical director and writer and producer, and I found that I could barely keep it together for 2.5 hours of rehearsal. And I didn't want to be in that goofy place while I'm talking to a lot of actors. And so I decided to pull back from that. I'll probably direct 2 shows a year, 2 original shows that are popular with the local actors. One, Christmas at the Biltmore, and a new one, Text Me, about a different confusions about texts that wind up to make a funny story. But as far as looking at a book show, doing the major works, as I have, I think that train has pulled out of the station now. And I have no regrets about it. I was happy with what I did. I have students on Broadway. I have had great success through them, and teaching, singing, and acting that I do somewhat still. Your success is measured by the success of others, and I enjoy lifting people, and always have. And so I'll continue to keep my thumb in that pie for a while.
Well, you do these interviews. Do you feel that being an actor, being a director, do you feel that those things have helped you with the podcast?
That's an interesting question. Acting in its truest sense is more about being than portraying. And so in that way, yes. I also am very fortunate that a friend of mine is Dr. Rachel Naomi Raymond, who's a sort of a world-renowned doctor who has taught doctors. Her medical books are in most medical schools. And as I was discussing what I was doing, she advised me not to go technical, but go from the experience. And so in that way, I think it's more being real and authentic that reaches the people I'm interviewing, and they understand that it's a friendly environment. They're often in their own living rooms, and I'm using a Zoom platform. Sometimes I have people come in to the microphones, but other times I find they're more relaxed in their own environments, and I can interview them very well. Zoom translates nice to Audacity, which pops out to MP3s pretty well. So it's been, I think, my calling to keep it a comfortable process for those that are doing the interviews with me. And I think that's probably helped the most of all.
Do you find yourself, when you're interviewing other stroke victims, that you're sort of learning from them as you go along, maybe even about your own recovery?
Good point. Absolutely. Absolutely. Tim, bless his heart, Tim Partain has had one of the most severe symptoms, and people can tune in to hear his program, but he had a rough time, one of the roughest that I've heard of, and that he was able to maintain and keep working for his family, for his kids. It's just amazing to me sometimes, and I'm often humbled by the unassuming genius of those people that I interview.
But do you find that hearing from them, you kind of get a bit more, maybe not inspirational, but you kind of understand a little bit more that I can go from here to maybe not exactly how I was, but in a different way.
That's an interesting point, Isaac. I do find that. I think that that's the power of the podcast, is that other people are hearing these things and going, "Wow, it's not just me." And I have these thoughts and thought I was abnormal, and here it's very natural because the brain is healing itself. So when you begin to hear these things, I don't think you can help but learn something from each of the people that have talked. And there are some people that have been going along after a first stroke and had a second one, and they persevered. They knew what they were facing, and it's a little bit overwhelming at first, but they persevered and they found what it was that inspired them to continue, and they worked their work. For people that have not had a stroke for, say, longer than 2 months ago, it's an undaunting, I mean, it's a daunting time. It's a very difficult to figure out how things are going to be. And by listening to the examples, the success stories of other people and the struggles of other people, it makes them feel a little bit more connected to the community. I often use a phrase, a community of commonality among stroke survivors. And there are some things that I'll hear people say and I'll think, wow, I bet nobody knows that they're having the same issues. Is a common part of the brain finding a new pathway to get signals to where they have to go. Today I read a message from a fellow who walked 100 yards, and it seems like, well, okay, so that's a football field. The guy hasn't walked in 6 years, and today he walked without a cane, without a walker, 100 yards. It's a pretty major accomplishment. And for those in those situations, when they hear that, it's like, okay, hope flourishes, hope endures. And that's what I think Stroke Hope is about.
Do you happen to know how many listeners you have currently?
I was surprised it was a little bit under 500, and it's only been 7 programs. So I think the word is traveling in the stroke communities that, number one, again, it's not monetized. It's a shorter program, and it's not a doctor, or nothing against the doctors. Right. They saved me, but it's not a professional medical person speaking. It's one of them. Yeah. And I think that's a lot to do with its popularity.
Right. I'm sure they know the doctor side of things, because they're going in and out of hospitals, and so
boy, we get a lot of papers to read. Yes, indeed. But some of the other things, I'll give you an example. After my second stroke, the first major one, I was getting around in my little modest apartment. Okay, I went out to the kitchen, made myself a cup of coffee, came back into my bedroom, put the coffee on my bedside table. I was watching the news on the TV, and I had frozen it, and then started to play as I turned, and reached for my cup of coffee, and it was ice cold. And I thought, that's funny. I just got it, And then I looked up at the TV, and 2 hours had gone by, and I didn't know where that went. I was just like, did I have another little stroke there, or what the heck was that? And they said, no, sometimes we call these time jumps. It's a very common thing, and it's part of your brain going, hold it, too much stimulation, and it shuts down a little for you. There's also sometimes some clouded thinking that happens, and the remedy is take a nap. In my past, if I had an injury playing sports or whatever, I would tend to work through it. And with strokes, you don't work through it. You let your body and your brain recover, and then if you take a nap and it goes an hour and a half and you wake up, it's amazing how you feel pretty much normal again. And it's just your brain saying, I need a little pause here.
You mentioned that there's small strokes and the larger strokes that happen to you. Now, is that your description of how it happened to you or how it felt, or is that actually like the doctors were saying this type of stroke is actually not that serious as the ones you've had
Yeah,
before?
they've never said anything isn't serious, but they do call them a mini,
Mm.
and that's kind of slang. But the scarring in the brain on the CAT scans or the MRIs that they do, it is like the tip of a cardboard match, or half that, very small spot, and it shows up in the brain mass as being a bright white spot. So you see it, and but like in my case with my first and my last, I didn't really know they were going on. They were just not symptomatic like the other three were. And I've changed somewhat. If you go by McDonald's, there's a picture of me saying, "Have you seen this man?" Because I've changed my diet habits,
Mm.
and I don't frequent that place. Nothing against them, and those who do. I dropped about 35 pounds. I haven't touched a salt shaker in about 2 years, and I religiously take my medications. Um, High blood pressure is a very common symptom of it, and while I didn't have exceptionally high blood pressure, it's very well medicated now. So I take it every morning, just about every night, and the results are eye-opening. That you stay on your program and your regime, you tend to be doing better. So as it is, I haven't had any incidents really since last April.
Mm.
I'm sorry, May, last May. Nothing too alarming at all.
Going back to that first person you reached out to on Facebook, how is it that you found that person? Was there a group of stroke survivors that you are a part of on Facebook, or did you just happen to hear from somebody you
It
know?
was a sister of the woman who posted it, and I just noticed it, and I kind of knew the woman, and so I just sent a note of encouragement and talked about the things that aren't being talked about so much in the medical communities as depression, time gaps, feeling like, guilty that you were impacting your family in this way.
Mm.
When the truth is, those things are all very natural, and those feelings are natural as well. So we shouldn't be denying them, but rather looking at them as though, okay, how do I deal? There was something else that you said that made me think of something, and this is a big part of it. And sometimes this is true for lots of chronic illnesses. A lot of people, when they're first getting ready to come home from the hospital, their plan is to get back to how they were.
Mm-hmm.
And the truth is, your plan needs to be how you're going to move forward, because some of the things don't come back fully, but your brain does adjust, and there's new ways to do things. And these days, mechanically, there are a lot of gadgets to help. I don't talk about those on the podcast. That's not my business. My business is the personal experiences. But there are some things to help. But it's more healthy, I believe, to look how you're going to go forward than trying to get back to something.
But is there anything that you want to say that maybe I didn't touch on, or?
I would just say that when you're in the throngs of the post-stroke experience, it's very easy to lose hope. And I implore people to explore support systems if they don't have people around them that are helping them. There are other options, and to explore those things. Go on some social media places, and social media is funny. You're going to find places that are no help at all, but if you keep looking, you'll find the ones with a nurturing environment where people support you very much. One of them is Hope After Stroke. That is one of the ones that I look at, and sometimes someone says something instilling such hope in the people who read it that I contact them and invite them to share their story on the podcast. So I'm hoping that overall, that idea of hope is really manifested through the stories that people hear and the sharing by the actual people instead of someone who's just researched it, but the actual people who've experienced the life-changing impact of stroke survival is very powerful. And I continue that hope continues to permeate the post-stroke populace.
One thing that I forgot to ask is that you have the episodes on Spotify, but there is a notification when you go on the website that says that it will be available soon to anywhere that you listen to podcasts.
Yes, we're processing it right now for iTunes, for YouTube, and another one, and thank goodness my daughter's doing it for me because that stuff starts to make my head spin around. But yes, it's there's another site that has just said, yes, we'd like to hear, we listened to the first 3 episodes, send us anything else you have. And they've said, we also represent another 1,000 platforms, so it will be everywhere. And that could happen maybe by the end of January. I'm hoping so. Sooner the better.